These are the men who betrayed Kwame Nkrumah. One was dragged before a firing squad. One was hunted down and killed. One was stripped of power and left in shame. And every single one of them fell the same way they made Nkrumah fall through betrayal. This is the story of how the betrayal of Africa's greatest dream were hunted by the very fate they unleashed. It is a dark lesson in how those who betrayed a nation's vision are eventually consumed by it. February 24, 1966. While Dr. Kwame Nkrumah was thousands of miles away on a peace mission to Vietnam, the country he had freed from colonial rule was being taken from him. The man who had led Ghana to become the first sub-Saharan African nation to gain independence, the voice of Pan-Africanism, the hope of a united Africa, was overthrown in a military coup. But this wasn't just a coup, it was a betrayal. By men he had promoted, by nations he had trusted, by a system that feared what he represented. Before we understand the betrayal, we need to understand who Kwame Nkrumah was and why he was dangerous to the powers of the world. Born in 1909 in Nkrofo, a small village in Ghana, Nkrumah was unlikely revolutionary. He studied in the United States and Britain, where he saw firsthand how the Western world worked. But instead of becoming a tool of the colonial system, he became its greatest threat. In 1957, Nkrumah led Ghana to independence from Britain. Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to break free from the colonial rule. At the independence ceremony, Nkrumah declared, "The independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total freedom of the African continent." This wasn't just talk. Nkrumah believed in Pan-Africanism, the idea that all African nations should unite as one. He gave money and military support to freedom fighters across Africa. He welcomed revolutionaries from other countries to Ghana. His capital, Accra, became a safe place for activists fighting against colonialism. He built the Volta Dam, one of the largest hydroelectric projects in the world. He started freedom education programs. He built factories and infrastructures. His goal was simple but huge: to turn Ghana into an industrial power within one generation, to prove that Africa didn't need Western help to prosper. And that made him a target. By the 1960s, the world was divided by Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union were fighting for control, and Nkrumah refused to pick a side. Ghana followed a non-aligned policy. Nkrumah would work with anyone, the Soviets, the Chinese, the Americans, whoever would help Ghana develop. But to the United States and Britain, this looked like Nkrumah was becoming a communist. In 1962, Nkrumah received the Lenin Peace Prize from the Soviet Union. He visited communist countries, he spoke against Western imperialism, and the West started to panic. Documents that were kept secret for years and released in 1999 show that the United States and Britain started planning to remove Nkrumah as early as 1961. The British Foreign Office ran a secret propaganda campaign against him. They wanted to create an atmosphere where Nkrumah could be overthrown and replaced with a more Western-oriented government. The Americans were more direct. They worked to hurt Ghana's economy. The US held back loans. They kept large amounts of cocoa, Ghana's main export, in storage to lower cocoa prices. This took away Ghana's foreign money and made the country poorer. By 1965, Ghana was in economic trouble. Prices were going up. There were shortages of basic goods. People were angry. And inside the army, some officers were starting to think about removing Nkrumah. But Nkrumah had also made mistakes. He had become more controlling. In 1964, he made Ghana one-party state and declared himself president for life. He used the Preventive Detention Act to arrest people without trial. The Preventive Detention Act simply means citizens of Ghana can be imprisoned without trial for up to 5 years. He built a personality cult around himself, taking the title Osajefo, Redeemer. Some of his own people had turned against him, and the West was ready to use them. The coup that overthrew Nkrumah was called Operation Cold Chop. The name itself was an insult. suggesting they were cutting him down like a piece of meat. The main plotters were military and police officers, men who Nkrumah had promoted, men who had benefited from his government. Let me introduce you to the main betrayers. Colonel Emmanuel Kwesi Kotoka was the mastermind. Born in 1926 in Volta region, Kotoka had risen through the ranks of the Ghana army. He had served in the Congo War with UN forces. In 1965, Nkrumah transferred him to Kumasi to command the 2nd Infantry Brigade. This was supposed to be an honor. Instead, Kotoka used this position to plan the coup. Kotoka had been thinking about removing Nkrumah for some time. When he got to Kumasi, he found someone who shared his views. Major Akwesi Amankwa Afrifa was Kotoka's right-hand man. Born in 1936 in Asante Mampong, Afrifa was a young, ambitious officer. According to his own account, he visited Kotoka at his house in Kumasi, and they discussed Nkrumah's upcoming trip to Hanoi. Over beer late into the night, they made plans. Afrifa wrote that Kotoka was so happy to find someone who agreed with him that they stayed up until morning making plans. They made a promise to each other. If anything happened to one of them, the other would finish the coup. Police Commissioner John Willie Kofi Harley brought the police force into the plot. The police had been hurt by Nkrumah's policies. After a policeman tried to kill Nkrumah in 1964, the police force was disarmed. 8 senior officers were fired and 2 were detained. Harley, as the most senior police officer, had his own reason to hate Nkrumah. He gave Kotoka important information and promised police support for the coup. Lieutenant General Joseph Arthur Ankra is an interesting case. Nkrumah had actually fired Ankra in August 1965 along with the Chief of Defense Staff, Major General Otu. Nkrumah replaced them with officers he thought were more loyal, but the coup plotters needed someone with big name to lead the new government, so they brought back the retired Ankra. Even though he hadn't been part of the planning, it was pure politics. They needed a face for the coup. Foreign Minister Alex Kwesi Saki was part of Nkrumah's delegation when the coup happened.
I made up my mind that I would come back home to submit myself to the new government that since I had been dismissed and since all ministers had been detained and since I was a minister, I had to come back and make my position known to the new government.
Nkrumah sent him to protest at the Organization of African Unity meeting. Instead, Kwesi Saki flew to Accra and pledged loyalty to the military government. Out of the 74-man delegation that traveled with Nkrumah, many abandoned their leader. And then there was the most painful betrayal of all, from the person who looked like him. US Ambassador Franklin Williams was one of the first African-American ambassadors. He presented his papers to Nkrumah on January 17, 1966, just a few weeks before the coup. But before taking his position, Williams had sent private letters to friends, boasting that he would soon be running the country. For Nkrumah, who had made Ghana a safe place for Black Americans and Pan-African ideals, this betrayal by Black Americans was especially painful. The plotters were smart. They knew they couldn't move against Nkrumah while he was in Ghana. His presidential guard was loyal and well armed, so they waited. In February 1966, Nkrumah left for Hanoi, Vietnam, on a peace mission to try to end the Vietnam War. He left behind a 3-person presidential commission to run the country. This was the moment the plotters had been waiting for. Kotoka used a smart trick. Nkrumah had said he might send Ghanaian soldiers to Rhodesia to fight the white minority government there. Kotoka used this as an excuse to run military training on the Accra plains. He said it was to test readiness for Rhodesia. Really, he was moving his troops from Kumasi to Accra for the coup. The operation began on February 24, 1966 at 4 o'clock a.m. Under cover of darkness, 600 soldiers began moving. The coup was carefully planned. Afrifa's job was to take the broadcasting house, the national radio station. This was key. Whoever controlled the radio controlled the nation's information. After heavy fighting, Afrifa captured it. Other troops moved to capture the International Communication Building, making sure Nkrumah couldn't contact Ghana from Vietnam. The hardest fighting was at Flagstaff House. the presidential residence. The Presidential Guard put up strong resistance. They were loyal to Nkrumah and fought hard, but they were outnumbered. The guard was crushed. General Charles Bawa, Nkrumah's chief of defense staff and a loyal supporter, was shot dead when he refused to cooperate. By 6 o'clock a.m. it was over. Harley's police had arrested most of Nkrumah's ministers. Over the next few days, they rounded up members of parliament, regional commissioners, and Convention People's Party officials. About 600 of Nkrumah's political prisoners were released. About 600 new prisoners, Nkrumah supporters, went in. At dawn, Kutuka went to the broadcasting house. Standing at the microphone, he made the announcement that shocked the nation. Fellow citizens of Ghana, I have come to inform you that the military, in cooperation with the Ghana police, have taken over the government of Ghana today. The myth surrounding Nkrumah has been broken. Parliament is dissolved and Nkrumah is dismissed from office. The coup was bloodless for most people. Only a few died in the fighting. But for Ghana and for Africa, something much bigger had died. For years, people accused the United States and Britain for being behind the coup. Nkrumah himself said it in his 1969 book, Dark Days in Ghana, but many dismissed this as the complaint of a bitter, defeated leader. Then in 1999, something happened. The US government released secret documents as part of the Foreign Relations series, and what they showed was shocking. A CIA officer named John Stockwell, who later became the critic of the CIA, revealed in 1978 that agents at the CIA's Accra station maintained close contact with the plotters as the coup was hatched. The CIA knew about the coup at least a year before it happened. The CIA station in Accra was so close to the coup plotters that they were able to coordinate the recovery of Soviet military equipment as the coup was happening. Stockwell even said the station proposed to storm the Chinese embassy during the coup, kill everyone inside, steal their secret, and blow up the building to hide the fact. This plan was stopped, but it showed how involved the CIA was. Inside the CIA headquarters, the Accra station was given full, unofficial credit for the coup, even though this wasn't written in official records. The British were just involved. A top-secret document from 1966 shows that Britain's foreign officer ran a covert propaganda campaign against Nkrumah. They produced and mailed thousands of leaflets from fake sources. They published hostile articles. They promoted anti-communist books. All of this was done either without showing who made it or using the name of fake Ghanaian group. The goal, as the document clearly states, was to create an atmosphere where Nkrumah could be overthrown and replaced with a more Western-oriented government. Ghana immediately realigned itself with the West. The new government cut ties with Guinea and the Eastern Bloc. They invited the International Money Fund and the World Bank to take over managing the economy. Everything Nkrumah had fought against, the new government embraced. A US National Security Council staffer named Robert Comer wrote a congratulatory message to President Lyndon Johnson on March 12, 1966, celebrating the coup. American and British diplomats were thrilled. US officials described the new military government as almost pathetically pro-Western. Nkrumah didn't learn about the coup until he arrived in China. Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai treated him with respect and courtesy for 4 days, but Nkrumah was a man without a country.
Finally, sir, do you think ex-President Nkrumah will ever attempt to return to Ghana?
We will be very pleased indeed to have him back in Ghana. We will give him the red carpet.
Thank you, sir.
He spent the rest of his life in Guinea, where President Sékou Touré named him honorary co-president. He continued to write and speak about Pan-Africanism and warned other African leaders about neo-colonialism, but he never returned to Ghana. Kwame Nkrumah died on April 27, 1972 in Bucharest, Romania from prostate cancer. He was 62 years old. Back in Ghana, the coup was initially welcomed by many people. The economic problems and Nkrumah's increasingly controlling rule had made him unpopular. Crowds celebrated in the streets. His statue outside Parliament was torn down and smashed to pieces. But the celebration didn't last. The military government that replaced Nkrumah brought its own problems. Ghana entered a period of instability, with coup after coup. The dream of rapid industrialization died. The Pan-African vision faded. Many of coup plotters met bad ends. Kotoka was killed in a failed counter-coup in 1967, just over a year after overthrowing Nkrumah. Afifa eventually became head of state but was executed by firing squad in 1979 during another military uprising. Today, Nkrumah is remembered very differently. In 1999, he was voted BBC African of the Millennium. His ideas about Pan-Africanism are studied around the world. His warnings about neocolonialism, how African countries can be independent in name but still controlled by outside powers, have been proven sadly accurate. The coup against Nkrumah wasn't just about removing one leader, it was about stopping a vision of an independent, united Africa that didn't need Western help, a vision that threatened the economic interest of powerful nations. As Nkrumah himself wrote, it has been one of the tasks of the CIA and other similar organizations to discover these potential traitors in our midst and to encourage them by bribery and the promise of political power to destroy the constitutional government of their countries. He knew exactly what happened to him, and his words remain a warning for Africa today. What do you think? Was Nkrumah a visionary leader betrayed by those who feared his success, or had he become too controlling, making the coup unavoidable? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this history interesting, please like and subscribe.
If you want to see more incredible ancestral histories of African kings and queens stories filled with drama, action, legacy, and power, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Who knows, even your king might be featured next. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe for more epic historical stories.